Hey there, welcome to LSAT Demon Daily. I'm Eric Johansson, a teacher with LSAT Demon. With me is Nathan Fox, co-founder of LSATdemon.com and the weekly podcast Thinking LSAT. We have an email from Suzanne.
Suzanne says, "Hi, I am newer to LSAT Demon. I've been drilling and doing time sections for a few weeks now. I study at least 1 hour each day. I went from a 145 cold diagnostic to a 152 practice test last week since signing up for the Demon. Thank God I decided not to use some other 16-week prep course that would have cost $1,600 and only guaranteed a 7-point increase."
You got a point there.
She's subtweeting one particular 16-week prep course that offers a 7-point improvement guarantee. The one thing, Suzanne continues, the one thing I have noticed is that I think I am good at reading the passages in reading comp or arguments and facts in LR, but I'm really bad at understanding the answer choices, especially when they say things like, quote, evidence for one thing because of another thing, or, quote, a consequence of the second result. You get the picture.
Sure.
It feels so abstract that I have a hard time understanding what they are offering, and then I lose track of my original prediction. She probably also doesn't like it when they talk about the former and the latter.
Yeah, that's always a pretty annoying construction.
Suzanne continues, but it's not just the abstract answers. I just find myself losing track of my predictions all the time as I get caught up in the answer choices. Evidence for the above is that I can close my eyes and tell myself exactly what's in the passage, argument, or facts, and reviewing the explanations confirms my comprehension. I understand why my answer is wrong and why the other answer is correct. But why do I get so confused by the answer choices? It's frustrating and a little embarrassing. Any tips? Thanks, Suzanne.
I think Suzanne is running into the fact that the people who write this test are good writers, which means they know how to write poorly in a confusing way and do so frequently to try to confuse you. My big reaction, Suzanne, is I think you can probably get better at letting go of wrong answers more quickly. And a lot of the time, at least for me, that just means getting confused by an answer choice and reacting like, well, that's confusing. I don't like that. Moving on.
Right.
And not needing to spend a ton of time to figure it out. Just letting it be enough to say, this is confusing. I hate it. I'm not going to pick it.
I did that in class last night. I had an answer choice where I was like trying to explain to the class why it was wrong, but I was very honest with them and I said, wrong answers don't have to make sense. 4 out of 5 answers are wrong. This answer seems like it's wrong. I certainly don't hear it convincing me that it's right. If I can't even understand it, then how is it right? Especially if, like Suzanne, I have an idea what I'm looking for. So the presumption that the wrong answers are wrong, or the presumption that any answer you're reading is probably wrong, is very powerful and seems like it might be exactly what Suzanne is missing.
Yeah.
It's hard to see that when you're scoring like in the 130s, 140s, whatever. You're not understanding. There's so much that you're not understanding that a lot of times you get into those answer choices just kind of hoping that the answers are going to bail you out. And they sometimes will. On easier questions, the wrong answers are going to be really obviously wrong and the right answer is going to be really obviously right. And so
you'll have that, oh, right. Yeah. Okay,
sort out questions by just kind of doing this process of elimination. But at a higher level, you really do need to be predicting the answers, which it sounds like Suzanne is doing. And then the way to stay, like the way not to forget your answer is that you have to then let go of 80% of the time pretty quickly.
Yep. And part of that means taking it one word at a time and not being prepared to ditch answer choices before reading the whole thing. I'm looking at the examples that Suzanne gave. A consequence of the second result, some abstracted, confusing thing. You might read the entire answer choice and be really confused by all the abstract, convoluted language, or maybe there's an opportunity to read a consequence and then stop there and think to yourself, wait a minute, what consequence?
Yeah, was there any causation in the facts at all?
Yeah.
Was there ever, because of this other thing happens? I
Hmm.
mean, if there were no causes or effects, I mean, consequence is an effect of a cause, right? So if they weren't talking about causation at all, then how can that possibly be correctly describing this argument? And
Hmm.
so, yeah, you can understand enough of it just to know that it's wrong.
Yeah. And frequently you can just get rid of it right there and not confuse yourself any further with the rest of that convoluted abstract answer choice.
Yeah.
It's like a cumulative thing that builds up over the course of a timed section or test as well. Like on this question, question number 5. All right, maybe you make it through and you've struggled through every answer choice and you're like, oh, okay, I get it now, and you pick the right one, and it's not that big a deal because you figured it out. But times 25, if that's what you're doing every single time, I think that's where a lot of people run into fatigue and burnout issues by the end of sections, is because you've engaged in this process 25 times in a row times 4 sections where you're really thinking about every single answer choice.
Yeah, it's especially fatiguing if you aren't quite sure what you're reading, aren't quite sure what you're looking for, and then if you give too much credit to the answers along the way, those wrong answers start to infect your understanding of the passage. Then you're like misunderstanding the next answer because this answer already convinced you that something is there that wasn't actually there, and then the whole question gets hard, and then the next question is hard. You can also make the next question hard by skipping a question. Like, you read a little bit of it,
Yeah.
you get intimidated, you don't quite solve it, you flag it and move on to the next one. So I hope, Suzanne, you're not doing that at all. I do not want you to flag questions. I want you to get as close as you're going to get, one question at a time, pick an answer, and then forget about it forever. Because if you're not doing that, then you've got like some part of your brain going, well, I got to make sure that I go back and do number 4. Got to
Yeah.
make sure that I go back and do number 7. And part of your brain is like subconsciously still even thinking about the facts in that argument. You're like conflating one argument with another argument, like you're working on two different questions at once, and hopefully Suzanne's not doing that at all.
Yeah. Two more things that
Okay.
I have in mind to help you in these moments, Suzanne, when you feel like you're in the middle of the answer choices and you're lost and you've forgotten your prediction and you've just become overwhelmed by these weird answer
Yep.
choices. Two things that I can think of to help. One is, you talk about losing track of your prediction. You should remember your prediction and remind yourself to check in on that. But I think more important than that, remind yourself of the conclusion of the argument.
Hmm.
Um, Assuming you're on a question that has an actual argument in it, I think just as important, or probably and more important than whatever specific prediction you made, remembering what the damn thing said in the first place,
Yeah.
and just using what the author said and their main point, use that as the North Star. And if you can come back to that, I think that will ground you and will remind you, okay, here's what this is what the author said, and I'm using that to get back on track. That's
Yeah, especially if they're
one thing.
asking you about argument parts, right? It
Yeah.
sounds like she might be talking about questions that are describing parts of the argument in the abstract.
Yeah.
And yeah, so all right, well, look, what was the conclusion? What evidence did they use to support that conclusion? And then that might help you to sort of get back on track. But I think my number one thing, and then I'll leave it there, is I really want you to just expect A to be wrong and then expect B to be wrong. Same with C, same with D, same with E. Get all the way through all 5. You should be eliminating all 5 answers more often than thinking there are 2 good answers. I did a
Hmm.
whole bunch of brand new questions last night in my class, questions that I was not familiar with, and I think I narrowed it down to 2 once. I eliminated all 5 on like 3 or 4 of them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just on a first read through because I've got really high standards on my first read through. So I'm not saying that these are conclusively wrong answers. On the first read through, I'm just saying, I don't think so. That's confusing. I don't want to get caught up in it. I want to make sure that I've read all 5 answers before I waste too much time trying to make sense out of nonsense. And so I'm very comfortable. It doesn't, like students freak out. Oh my God, I just eliminated D and then I eliminated E as well. And we see this in the results when E is the by far most commonly chosen wrong answer,
Yeah.
where people are just punting, or they're just like, oh, I don't understand this one. It must be E, pick E. And instead of doing that, I'm going to have the same scrutiny on E, even if I've already eliminated A, B, C, and D. I'm going to be expecting E's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I read it. It's wrong. It's wrong. Okay, fine. Well, I eliminated all 5. All right. So I got to go back and reinterpret one of these answers so that I can understand how it was meant to be correct. But I'm not doing that on a first read through. On a first read through, I'm like, hey, this is probably wrong.
Yep.
And I'll only start giving it a lot of credit if it convinces me that it deserves it. And or I've already eliminated all 5 and I have to lower my standards a little bit.
Yep.
That's how you avoid that's how you try to not get caught up in the answer choices.
Yeah. One additional thing I would add to that is I find it useful sometimes to, before I look at the answer choices, but after reading the questions, actually say to myself, here's what I do to get rid of answer choices. This is what I'm looking for, or specifically, this is what will make an answer wrong. It seems obvious, but I just it's something I did on logic games all the time. Like if a question on a logic game said, if B is second, then which one of the following could be true? Just saying, all right, well, I'm looking for the one that could be true, which means I'm getting rid of the answer choices that cannot be true.
Oh, I see. So yeah, thinking through the nature of the wrong answers before
Correct.
you even go there.
Yep.
Okay, right. So an example of that is you're doing a must be true question. There's one answer that must be true according to the record.
Yep.
Which means that the 4 wrong answers could be false.
Yep.
On a sufficient assumption question, there's one correct answer that proves the conclusion of the argument correct. There are 4 wrong answers that, they might help the argument or they might not. They could be totally irrelevant. They could weaken the argument. They could strengthen the argument, but not quite enough to actually prove the conclusion correct. And so then you read A and hey, it is helping the argument. Sounds like it's kind of on track. It's kind of connected, but really all it's doing is repeating a premise or strengthening, but not getting you all the way to, okay, that forces the conclusion to be correct. All right, well, so then it's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, I like that tip.
Especially on accept questions. I find that to be helpful to think through what makes the answers wrong.
Sure. So each of the following could be true except. Wait a second. Okay.
So I'm eliminating answer choices that could be true. Okay.
Yeah.
So if my reaction to reading this answer choice is, yeah, I guess that could be true, I get rid of it. And just prime yourself with that before going into the answer choice.
You might also prime yourself to think about the nature of the correct answer in that case, right? On an accept question, each of the following could be true except, okay, so there's 4 that could be true. That means that there's 1 that can't be true. Oh, I'm looking for a must be false. So I have to know that this is false. There are 4 answers where I'm going to shrug and go, maybe, maybe, maybe. But the one right answer, I'm going to go, no. That can't be true.
Exactly.
All right, cool.
Great. Email daily@lsatdemon.com if you'd like to ask us a question or share some LSAT or law school admissions news. Thanks for listening.